How are y'all doing?
Exactly right. These are yours.
Thanks, Scott.
Nice to be back here.
Good to see you, sir.
You bet. Thanks. Nice to meet you. What do you do?
He works for the radio station.
Radio. Nice.
Yes, sir.
Just like my girl. Hey. How are you, sir? Fine. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Nice seeing you.
I appreciate it. You guys related?
No, I was actually walking out
The reason why is you got unbelievably the same color blue eyes.
Oh, no.
Hey!
Now say that into this.
You're a juror? Good boy. Appreciate y'all doing your duty.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Judge Newsom?
Hey, Judge, we're sure glad you're here. Yeah, I'm too. Thank you, buddy. We could use a little revitalization work in here. Yeah. Here, good to see you, buddy. Thanks. You coming down to Austin? Down to Austin? For the meeting? Oh, the constable meeting? When is it? Well, we already had ours. Oh, yeah. It's already over there. Sorry. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Hi, Jimmy. Nice to meet you, Judge Newsom. Good.
I'm Cheryl. I work with Judge Newsom. Nice to meet you.
Hey, there we go.
Hey,
Judge, we appreciate that. No, we stopped for you. That's what we did. Thank you. I really miss taking those people. Well, serving on the jury. I tell you what, we're about to go into punishment. All right, we're in business. Thank you. Yeah.
This is Judge Smith.
I'm Judge Smith.
Hey, Judge. Good to meet you. I love you. All right. Nice picture there. Thank you very much. Sure, nice to meet you.
Glad you're here.
Me too. Thanks. It's okay. Miss Bush. Laura. Nice to meet you.
I'm Lisa Brewer.
Nice to see you there. Thank you.
Patricia Dorner, I'm the district clerk.
Great, clerk. Thanks. Appreciate your hospitality. Thank you very much.
Governor, we're in the process of doing some work that we can on our own, restoring the courthouse. We've gone down to some of the old wood.
Yeah.
Once we finish this up, all the walls, the ones in the circle, and died in all the wars, men and women. This is Captain Scott. He's our veteran affairs officer. How do you do, sir? And I'd like to show you one other thing before we make the tour upstairs.
Good.
Good to see you.
Hey, guys, just wanted to show you that.
Yeah, we can meet you.
Square, Texas doesn't have a monument to our veterans.
Really?
Yes, we did. This is
Yeah, I'm sure there's something coming in.
co-chairman and putting together.
It is Marie.
Larry Metcalf's doing that. Does the work at AU.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure.
It's going to cost $150,000. We're going to try to dedicate it July the 1st.
Next year.
We're down here to dedicate it.
Yeah, well,
We'd like to invite you.
we'll see what's happening.
We had about 8,000 people in the square this last
That's what they told me. Yeah, thanks.
Would you mind getting a picture with Mr. Allison?
No, not at all.
Now she's back here, I think.
WT Allison, mentor speaker.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go in there.
He just wants to show
This is
Okay,
our
good.
district courtroom.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm honored.
This is our district courtroom.
Take a while.
I'll show you.
Yeah, there's a second level. Yeah.
See the archway.
Yeah, you need to restore view. Yeah, this is Hi, ladies. Nice to meet you.
Cheryl Pratt. Hi. Rachel Bray.
Governor, Chuck Lawrence. I like to stay. Thank you, sir. Pleasure to see you.
But it's closed off.
Marvin, I'm not over big deal. And a boy, good to see you. See you, appreciate it.
Quit harassing the judge, John.
Sorry. I think they're gonna let you go upstairs and see underneath, on top of all of that.
Yeah, you know something? If you can raise that ceiling and make that a better level. Is that what you're saying? Lavaca County? Is that it, Logan? Is that the county seat of Lavaca County, Hallettsville? Yeah, they've done that in their courthouse. Wait, you should see this. You should see the restored courtroom in their in the Lavaca County Courthouse. It is the exact same type of situation where they've got the tin roof, but the with the balcony, and it is fabulous. Not only that, it is so good that they've used it for movies,
Oh, fantastic.
which could be a new industry.
Well, it could be. It could be.
We've already got the downtown square. We just
I get my picture.
Yeah, come on. One more. We weren't paying attention.
Thank you.
Is this your quarters, Judge?
Please come in.
Key is you gotta get yourself a little central air in here.
Oh, yeah. That would be nice.
And
And an elevator.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, thanks.
Well, thank you, Governor, for coming to see us, and I'm gonna follow you. Oh, thank you. Come on, back out everybody's way here. I'm gonna catch you up again. If you're the note taker, because it's listed that way. This wall over here fell. Had that much clearance. And they like.
Sorry, I didn't have my flash on. Were you taking that?
Can we get you over one picture with you?
Sure.
And then just hang on to it, because I want you to get one more.
Right here by the Reese's Pieces.
Can we get one more?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Thank you.
Hi, you bet. Thank you.
She said she got called down in the bathroom.
She tried to hide in the bathroom, but I waited her out. I waited her out.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks. I'm a big
Good luck
fan of the courthouse
Good luck
project.
in your campaign.
Yeah,
We hope to
thanks.
See you this fall.
I'm a working man.
We know that.
You want to do the lead to the news right now?
That's right, yeah. Outside.
Well, not right here.
Woo, look at this guy. Good job. I really hoping. Fantastic. How are you, sir?
That would be
Nice to
fun.
see you.
Think he'd do
You
it?
want me to sign that for you?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'd love to. Who you got there with you? Your sidekick? Give me your first name.
Bernie Deere.
The E-R-N-I?
Do welcome to News Notebook for the Wednesday, July.
Dr. Coffin, if you wouldn't mind signing one for him.
What's his first name?
Don Coffin, he's from the university.
Right.
He and I did this project that you awarded us, the
Right.
agriculture.
Right.
We sort of appreciate
2000. TNRCC.
it. We were the agriculture
Absolutely.
division.
Yeah.
We had the compost.
2000, is that what it's called?
It was an excellence, environmental
Yeah,
excellence.
award. Yeah, well, thanks. I remember it well.
We sure do appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Have a good trip.
You bet. See y'all later. You bet. Woo! How you doing?
Can you see by the
I want to thank the people who worked hard, like Patsy and Billy and Sam, to put this together. And I particularly want to thank your beautiful voices for serenading the governor. Billy was telling me, Carol, that you've just started.
Yes, sir.
You've done a fantastic job after 1 month of existence. And I appreciate so very much you're singing a hymn that the governor loves to hear. Texas, our Texas, all hail the mighty state. Which reminds me of how honored I am to be your governor. It is a huge honor to be the governor of the greatest state in the United States. What I thought I would do is give you kind of a state of the state, and tell you why I'm so optimistic and hopeful about Texas, and then I'd be glad to shake hands and take pictures and sign autographs with anybody who wants to. First, I realized, Billy, I wasn't your first choice of speakers.
I didn't say that.
You're a smart man. You would rather have the First Lady of Texas than the governor. I know you. But unfortunately, Laura's not here. You got me. But I can't tell you how proud I am of Laura. Our family life is so good and so happy, primarily because the First Lady of Texas loves her jobs just like I love mine. When I married Laura, who was born and raised in Midland, Texas, had a girl. They still don't have any trees out there. But I told her, I said, honey, if you marry me, I promise you one thing. You'll never have to give a speech. Well, so much for political promises. She gives a lot of speeches. And she talks about things that matter. Breast cancer awareness. She talks about Texas artists, Texas writers. She's side by side with me in our battle against illiteracy across the state of Texas. She has become such a good speaker and is so beloved that I now understand all the things my dad has been going through all these years. Speaking about my mother, I want to share one of my favorite stories, and it reminds me to always tell people that I see, like these two twins, well, one of the twins is here, I don't know where the brother is. There they are. Always listen to your mother. I learned this lesson when I was in Fredericksburg, Texas. Here was the governor of Texas, the former president of the United States, the former First Lady, current wife of the former president of the United States, Barbara, in front of 30,000 people in Fredericksburg. It was a day that I'll never forget. It was a day to pay homage to the World War II veterans who had fought in the Pacific Theater. And to me, it was an important day, because it gave me a chance to stand up and say thanks to the moms and dads of my parents' generation on behalf of the sons and daughters of my generation for the incredible freedom that we have in Texas and oftentimes take for granted in the United States of America. And I got up to speak and I said, Mr. President, welcome to Central Texas. And there was a nice round of applause. And I said, Mother. And the place went wild. I said, Mother, it is clear that people in Texas still love you. And so do I, but you are still telling me what to do after 50 years. And a guy in a big cowboy hat steps out in the middle of Fredericksburg, Texas, and cups his hands in front of 30,000 constituents and screams, and you better be listening to her too, boy. I listened to her. You listen to your mother too. I listened to her. She said, if you ever get to Austin, do not be putting your finger in the wind to figure out which way it's blowing. You go and do what you think is right, based upon principles. This may come as quite a shock to you in this day and age of polls and opinion polls and focus groups. But up until 1 month ago, I had never taken a poll since I had been governor of Texas. Why do you need to take a poll to know what you believe? Let me tell you what I believe. I believe in limited government. I think we do it right in the state of Texas. I have now been through 2 legislative sessions. We meet 140 days out of every 2 years. We come together, we focus on the state's business, we figure out what's right for the state of Texas. We do our business and we go home. I've seen it work. You know, I tell the governor of California, who meets all the time,
every year that our motto in Texas, if government doesn't meet, it can't hurt you. Don't let anybody fool you. Limited government works in this great state, particularly when you focus on what's best for the people of Texas, and not what's best for some political party or another. If you believe in limited government and have limited government, though, you got to learn to prioritize. And my priority for the state of Texas is, and always will be so long as I'm the governor, the education of the children of this state. It is by far the most important thing we do as a state. I like to say education is to a state what national defense is to the federal government. It's a huge priority, and we better get it right if we're going to have a decent and compassionate tomorrow. I think we are getting it right. First of all, we trust local people to make the right decisions for the schools, the people who care more about the children of Sulphur Springs, Texas, or the people of Sulphur Springs, Texas. There is a role for the state, in my judgment, and it's twofold. One is to set clear and measurable goals. Clear goals, goals that everybody can understand, and goals that can be measured, like this one. Every child, and I mean every child in the state of Texas, must be reading by 3rd grade and be able to read at appropriate grade level throughout their entire public school career. That's easy to understand. Every child. Not a handful of children, not a few children, but every single child must be reading by 3rd grade. Not 8th grade, not 12th grade, but by 3rd grade and remain at appropriate grade level. The state will measure. We test. I'm a results-oriented person. I believe in results. I don't believe in guesswork as to whether or not we're meeting the goal. And so we measure. And if a school district like you've done here in Sulphur Springs meets the goal, we ought to say as a society to the teachers and principals and school board members and parents, thanks. We appreciate what you're doing. But if there is failure in the system, we ought to blow the whistle on failure and demand excellence for every single child. Now, the state is not going to tell you how to chart your path to excellence. That's up to you. But we will help. We have recently redesigned the reading curriculum in the state of Texas. I tried to take all the politics out of the debate and to focus on the science of reading. Phonics works, and it's now an integral part of the curriculum of the state of Texas. Our budget priority next year is going to be public schools. We will fund the enrollment increases for the school districts around the state of Texas. We will help with construction projects for the school districts around the state of Texas. But I want to do one other thing, and I'm really here to explain it because I want your support on it. I believe we ought to end social promotion in Texas schools. This business about last year, 40,000 children failed the 3rd grade reading test. And guess what happened to them? Instead of being given help, they were moved to the 4th grade. And guess what's likely to happen to them? They'll never learn to read. Now, that's not to say some can't learn to read, but it's going to be a lot harder. In my judgment, if a child fails the 3rd grade reading test, we ought to say, what can we do to give him or her help now before it is too late? And so I'm going to ask the legislature to pass $200 million to send to local districts to make sure that no child in our state gets left behind. That if a child can't pass the 3rd grade reading test, we will pass money back to local districts. And the local district can have a school within a school, an after-school program, a summer school program. I don't care, but I do not want the children passed through. I want them to get the help necessary so that they can learn to read. And when they learn to read, guess what's going to happen? The math scores will go up. The science scores will go up. The best juvenile justice program in the state of Texas is to teach every single child to read. There is a lot of talk in society about self-esteem. Some accuse me of having too much self-esteem. You can't teach self-esteem. There's no such thing as self-esteem 101. But you can teach a child to read and write and add and subtract and they will earn self-esteem. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the greatest state of all these states. We got to do more than though teach our children academics. As a society, we must teach our children there are wrong decisions to life and make and right decisions to make in life. There are 3 prescriptions for failure. Let me put it this way. There are 3 prescriptions to make life very hard. 1 is dropping out of school. 2 is abusing drugs and alcohol. And 3 is having a child out of wedlock. One of the interesting things that's happening in Texas is we're now a high-tech manufacturing capital of the United States. That's hard to believe. It's no longer oil and gas or dairy farming or cotton farming or ranching. A main driver of trade in Texas is high-tech manufacturing companies. It's anticipated there will be 100,000 new high-tech manufacturing jobs in Texas if we have a trained workforce. Those jobs are available for our children who graduate from high school. These aren't just master's degree jobs or engineering degree jobs, but these are jobs available for children of all walks of life who go to high school in the state of Texas, who graduate and who get an 18-month associate degree from community college. I can't think of a more hopeful future for children in our state to think that there's 100,000 high-paying, good jobs available if they make the right choice and aim high and stay in high school. So message 1, as a society of decent people we got to pass out is, don't drop out of high school. Aim high. A second message is, don't destroy your body and your health by abusing drugs and alcohol. The biggest problem facing Texas, in my judgment, is the fact that 30% of the babies will be born out of wedlock this year. Now, I want to make this clear to everybody here. We will love the babies in the state of Texas. We're a compassionate state. No child will be punished in Texas. We will love the babies to the extent possible, encourage others to do so as well. And if need be, we'll help the mom get her feet back on the ground. But as a society, we've got to say, to men and women alike, having a baby out of wedlock is a wrong decision to make. It is wrong. It is wrong for the baby. It is wrong for the mama. And I've got a special word for the guys who think it's cool to father a child. That's not machismo. That's lowlife. To father a child and walk away and expect the state or somebody else to pick up the tab. Which really leads me to my ultimate goal for the great state of Texas. And that's to usher in what I call the responsibility era. The era in which each and every Texan understands with absolute certainty that each of us are responsible for the decisions we make in life. Today's culture has clearly said, if it feels good, do it. And if you've got a problem, just go ahead and blame somebody else. But I'm an optimistic fella, because I've seen a culture change once in my lifetime. And if there are any other baby boomers out here, and I see a few over there, you've seen a culture change too, so you know it can change again. Now, government can pass laws that help usher in the responsibility era, and we will. Just take, for example, the Juvenile Justice Code of Texas. It clearly says, we love you, but discipline and love go hand in hand in Texas now. It says, we care for you. It says, we care for you, but if you break the law, there will be certain bad consequences in our state, because we want you to learn the lesson. Same in the welfare code. It says in order to receive welfare, you've got to sign a responsibility agreement that you'll be responsible. But we can't make people love one another. I wish I knew the law. I wish I knew the amount of money to spend that would say in Texas we will love each other. I don't know it. But I know this. This is a state full of loving and decent people, many of whom find their calling from a higher power. The truth of the matter is the best place to find love is right in our neighborhoods with loving, decent souls. You see, cultures change one act of decency at a time, one act of compassion. You see, we can change the face of Texas one heart, one soul, one conscience at a time. And so when I hear somebody walk up to me and say, Governor, I'm mentoring a child to learn to read, I realize the culture's changing. When I hear of a Sunday school class that's helping a welfare family get up on their feet and have a better shot at life, I see the culture changing. And when I hear about prison ministries who are going into prisons around the state of Texas, helping prisoners change their heart, trying something new in recidivism, like a changed soul. I see our culture changing in the state of Texas. If there's any state that can usher in the responsibility era, it's the greatest state in the United States, the great state of Texas. Courthouse, one of my missions is to get the legislature to set aside money to revitalize the courthouses of the state of Texas. The reason I believe that so strongly is, one, these are architectural gems that we must not let go to waste. And secondly, the courthouse is the center of community life. The courthouse means so much to the past of Texas, and as our world changes into the 21st century, I think it's important for us to preserve things in the past that talk about Texas's strength. Hard-working people, decency, God-fearing, community-oriented people, just like here in this great county. Thank you for coming. God bless you.
For openers, Bill Ratliff and Rob Junell, their spare time, are writing a new constitution for the state of Texas. Bill tells me that his new constitution will give the governor more power. Is the governor's office today mainly the power of persuasion?
No, it's not at all. Actually, the governor can be a very powerful position. I always like to say a weak person will make a weak governor, and a strong person can make a strong governor. The governor's office has got some unique powers. When you only meet 140 days out of every 2 years, the power to call a special session is a very powerful power, a powerful chance to enact leverage at the legislative level. There's no question that the governor's got a mighty bully pulpit, but matters such as a line item veto or the capacity to call a special session and the power of appointment gives the governor a unique set of powers. And if Senator Ratliff cares to give the governor more power, I'm more than willing to accept it. The office of governor has evolved over time. Right now, the governor appoints the commissioner of insurance, the commissioner of education, the head of the head of all the medical. The umbrella organization over DHS, MHMR, Department of Health, HHSC. In other words, the governor appoints a lot of people who are responsible for a major portion of the budget. That's not the way it used to be, and so the power of the governor has legislative evolved over time as well. And I found the office to be plenty powerful. There's always a struggle, by the way, during the course of legislative sessions where the legislature wants to erode the power of the governor some, and where the governor's trying to get more power. If they were to rewrite the Constitution, I would argue for the governor having more direct appointing powers. I would also argue to make sure that they didn't have annual sessions. I think limiting the amount of time the legislature meets makes eminent sense.
How about a cabinet?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, one can start advocating a cabinet, and then the question of the Attorney General comes up, or the question of a lieutenant governor comes up. The cabinet style, the pure cabinet style form of government has the governor appointing all positions that here in Texas are now elected. And I'd like to appoint as many as possible if I were the governor, because oftentimes in our state you sometimes get blamed for public policy when you don't have any effect on the public policy. And I believe in aligning authority and responsibility to the best extent possible. I think rewriting the Constitution is a very tall order. And I respect Senator Ratliff and Representative Janelle for trying. We'll just see how it goes. The last Constitutional Convention was in the early 70s, where they rewrote the Constitution, and then it failed at the very last minute, as I recall.
Ratliff says he's serious.
Yeah, he is serious. He's a serious guy, and he's a very effective state senator. And he's even more effective now that he's head of the appropriations process. It's amazing what the head of the appropriations process can get done. Actually causes the governor to have to pay attention to him. And but I respect Bill Ratliff. He's a fine state senator. He's one of the best there is. And if anybody can sell his body on the need to get a 2/3 vote to get it up to the voters of the to amend the Constitution, it could be him.
I know you don't like polls, but polls say that the Republican candidates this year, with the exception of an attorney general, are in the lead. Is so far in Texas, we've had a real good working relationship between Republicans and Democrats in getting things done.
You bet.
Will this shift that balance?
No, I don't think so. I think that what will determine whether or not there is a bipartisan spirit is, one, the personalities involved, and two, whether or not there's power sharing at the legislative level. So, for example, in the Senate, you have 17 Republicans, a Democrat lieutenant governor, but you also have got some Democrats and some Republicans as committee chair. Same in the House, and I think that's really where we'll see whether there's a split government or not. And I think so long as there's power sharing during a limited session, I think that there will be harmonious. I don't think it matters so much for the statewide candidates. I think it matters more at the legislative level as to whether or not there will be partisan bickering. There's always going to be some partisanship, but the question is, can the leadership rise above that and focus on a few things and do them well?
Both individuals running for governor this year have gone to Washington.
Yeah.
Is that becoming a typical campaign stop for Texas governors?
Well, I think both governors candidates in 1994 went to Washington as well, probably in 1990. And so I think the question is it necessary to raise money from out of state in order to finance a campaign? And the answer to that is, to a certain extent, it is. Probably 15% of my money will come from out of state this year. That was roughly what it was last time. And I mean, most of my fundraising is in Texas, and most of it is from small donors, but occasionally I go out of the state to raise money, and so far it seems to be pretty successful. This is a big state. In 1994, Governor Richards spent $16 million. I spent $13 million. I'm not going to let that happen to me again this time.
I've got to ask you one off-the-wall question.
Sure.
And that
It
is...
wouldn't be the first.
Sure. In your visit to Washington, of course, there was a lot of noise being made about a run for the presidency.
There's been a lot of noise being made about that in my visit to Sulphur Springs as well.
Sure. and in that concept, do you think you could get the federal government to go along with limited government like Texas has?
Well, that's a very interesting question.
I'm serious.
No, I am serious about that too. I think that if the government were to meet, one of the interesting questions would be, can the federal government do a better job of managing its budget on a biennium basis like we do? I like two-year budgets. I think it causes budgeteers to be more conservative. I think it causes budgeteers to be more thoughtful. I think it also gets the budget battle out of the way. It seems like to me that much of Congress's time is dedicated to budget battles. And if you'd had a biennium budget, so the first year of a session they would end up having the budget in place, and the second year they could focus on other matters, which then may mean that you could actually limit the amount of time. I think if you were to look at this year, if I'm not mistaken, that Congress goes into recess like maybe the 1st of August for the rest of the year. Yeah. So that in itself is relatively limited government. And but you know what's interesting, and one of the powers of a governor is when you have a definite end of a session. What's interesting is a close observation is when you watch the dynamics of a legislative session. As the session comes closer to the end, the power begins to shift to the executive branch, because the executive branch has the capacity to call a special session, and no one likes a special session. And the reason why the legislators tend not to like it, one is they're tired and they want to go home, but two, it's only the governor that can set the agenda. It's only the governor that gets to decide what issues come up to the floor, and that in itself makes a pretty unique position. So say there's an unfinished business on XYZ piece of legislation. A governor then has the capacity to add 2 or 3 other matters, which may enhance the capacity to get the first measure passed. And so if you think through what I'm saying, that generally is a power accorded to the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor. And they've got the capacity during the session to be able to figure out bill orders and stuff on how to get things done. All of a sudden now that shifts more to the executive branch. And so time certain of departure is a very important concept in the legislative process. I'm not sure the legislators in Washington would want to give that up. I'm not sure they'd want to give it up, but I think it's a very good question. I can't tell you how shocked the people like the governor of California or New York when I tell them we only meet 140 days out of every 2 years. This is a state of 20 million people, and we function. And we function quite well. I have this theory in life, and it's not nothing new. A lot of people have this theory that if we were to expand the amount of time the legislature would meet, they would invent reasons for their existence. And so therefore, if you have an 11-month legislative session every year, you've got 11 months of people trying to invent reasons to exist, which means, perhaps too much government. And I'm a big believer in limited government. It's been incredibly effective. Now, in order to have it, though, your first question is germane. You cannot allow this system to lapse into partisan gridlock because you don't have enough time. And therein lies because once the session is over, the executive branch tends to function in its own separate departments, and people get along pretty well. Yeah, Jonathan.
This is a question from a sort of European perspective.
Yes,
there are
Jonathan.
many stereotypes of Texas, Stetsons, Texas Rangers, so on and so forth.
Guns.
One of the contemporary stereotypes is the death penalty.
Yeah.
And as you know from your letters which pour into your office, Texas has developed a reputation, particularly in Italy and France, of being a very violent and cruel state. That's the perception.
Well, my recommendation is they come to Texas and they'll find the people of Texas compassionate, decent people who want to hold people accountable for their behavior. And my other recommendation is don't commit a murder in the state of Texas. Seriously, I don't mean to say that facetiously.
Carl Tucker. I mean, that must have been very difficult.
The Carl Tucker incident,
personally,
it was difficult. It was difficult because the governor's mansion was surrounded every day by decent people who were concerned about it. It was difficult because letters from all around the world were pouring. What was not difficult, Jonathan, though, was to see the Europeans come in here and scream and holler and rant and rave with Bianca Jagger. It was like a celebrity fest. I respected the opinions of my fellow Texans who were deeply concerned about, the state. It's not to say I don't respect the opinions of the Europeans, but I found it to be, kind of more showtime. And it's like the Mexican governors who I've talked to about the death penalty. They're against the death penalty. I said, we just disagree. I said, we in Texas believe the death penalty because we believe it's a deterrent to crime. It's not because we're barbaric people. It's not because we're harsh people. It's just because we believe it is best to save innocent lives by saying loud and clear there is a bad consequence for murder in the state of Texas. And so, in all due respect to the Europeans, I think if they were to come here, they'd find this to be a gentle land and a decent people. But a people who says, we're going to hold you accountable for your behavior. And hopefully it'll work.
Sir, you have not yet said you will run for president. What would induce you to, though, in your
Well, I haven't said I will, and I haven't said I won't. What I've said is the truth. I don't know whether I will or will not seek the presidency. I do know I want to get reelected governor, and my fellow Texans are going to have to factor that in to their equation when they vote. That's the only way I know how to handle the issue, is just to be up front. And there's a lot of factors that will go into my decision, which will take place if I'm reelected after the inauguration, after the State of the State, and probably after most of the session gets underway. Probably the largest consideration is a personal consideration. What will this do to my family? What will this do to my future life? It's like being in the ultimate bubble. And that's just something, and I understand what the bubble means. I have a father who was in it and is still in it to a certain extent. Once a president, always a president. You just don't go fishing on Lake Fork by yourself. You don't go wandering into a mall. And so those are considerations that one has to make. On the other hand, there's the consideration that can an administration change the nature, lift the soul of America, lift the spirit of this country. And so those will be the considerations that I'll have to weigh out.
We are way over.